I've been trying to hold my thoughts in my head, but I can't do it anymore. Before I go on a rant, I want to say I truly appreciate the people who are listening and have been empathetic with the black experience in America. This isn't for you, but I truly appreciate you listening anyway.
Does every time you post something on Facebook, do you just feel like, oh man, this stuff gets good feedback, I need to do this more? Or do you have some reluctancy just because of, your position and kind of maybe the recognition it draws to you?
So a combination of both. So even when I first posted that video, I sent it to like 4 or 5 people. I'm like, do you think this is okay? Like, I don't want to post it. Like, I want to, but I don't want to, because I don't really like getting into arguments.
Mm-hmm.
I will argue, but I try to avoid confrontation. And the main reason I do that is because people tend to be very, I don't know, opinionated about things unfairly. I don't know how to even word it that way.
So we're very opinionated fairly, maybe.
Right. Some people are fairly opinionated, right? And then when you present them with facts, they're like, oh, okay, I never thought about it like that. Let me reposition. That don't mean you changed your mind, and you shouldn't. It just means that you thought about it at least.
And learning new information. Yeah.
Learning new information is great for some people, but for other people, it's not great. And they don't like that because it goes against their whole system. So I'm always hesitant to post things like that. But I think that, like you said, it's a combination of that too. Well, I was getting a lot of good feedback from it. And so a lot of times my posts don't have like a lot of negativity on it.
That's true. So, yeah, they don't.
So that means it must be going well. And anybody that has a problem with it usually emails me or messages me. And so I'm like, okay, well, if I can do it where I always think about things before I post. I always think about things before I say them too, because I hear all the arguments, I hear all this stuff, and like all that stuff is just white noise. Mm-hmm. So I try my best to be very purposeful in what I post.
Do you feel like there's a common demographic with people who give you negative feedback? Like, is it generally a certain race or a certain age or a mix?
Yeah, ironically, it's the people that I should love the most. It's the Christians. It's the Christians that give me the most, which is the most frustrating thing that I ever heard. And the reason why it's frustrating, because a lot of times they tend to, like Christians do, we tend to use the Bible to suit our own purposes instead of looking at what the Bible actually says. Because sometimes when you actually read the Bible, it says some stuff you don't want to hear. Right? Sure. I'm talking about for myself too. Like, I'd be real, like, man, I ain't want to hear that. I ain't want to hear that that. So it's frustrating to have Christian people who claim to know God, claim to know the Bible, be against helping people or supporting love, or like it boggles my mind to no end. But yeah, those are the people that tend to be the most boisterous.
Well, listen, I have like so much. I love to just dive in, and there's a lot of meat that I just want to go. But I think my son gets on this all the time. He's like, Dad, you got to make sure you do a proper introduction. And so okay. I think one, welcome to the Two Opinionated Guys podcast. Today we have Javon Johnson with us, and Javon, just give us the background of where you came from, who you are, and what you're doing today, because it's really intriguing to me.
So for me, I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I know you hear Wisconsin, you're probably thinking farm, dairyland, all that stuff. But Milwaukee is like
I think of cold, actually.
Yeah, it's cold. Yeah, you can think of cold too. It's super cold. I remember they canceled school because the wind chill be like minus 19 degrees. It's crazy.
Nope.
It's awful. But in Milwaukee, though, like, it's a city, right? It's pretty much like a smaller version of Chicago. It's just a city. That's all it is. And so when you start thinking about it, where I grew up at, it was very violent, very hard place to live, very poor place to live. We grew up very poor. Once the food stamps and stuff ran out, that was it. Like, you had to eat whatever was there or not eat, to be honest with you. Then, you had all kind of violent things that happened over there. Like, my sister almost she pretty much had a bullet fly past her head in our house from a drive-by shooting. Somebody tried to throw me over an overpass, on a train track, just because they didn't like the way I looked.
Can I ask you, are these Are these
Okay.
neighbors? Are these people that don't like you? Are these white people? Are these black people? Are these Mexican people? Who are these people that
All,
are?
at this time, it's all black people because we had like one old white lady in the neighborhood. She just lived there because she'd been there the whole time, and then one white girl that went to our school. So like it was all black people and like 2 Mexicans. You know, that's about it. And so like all this stuff is like black people just in the neighborhood that I was in. It was just all bad. Like when I was 18, my best friend got shot in the head by a 13-year-old boy who wanted to be in the gang.
Mm.
And the role he had to shoot somebody that he knew in order to get. So he knew the little boy. He knew the little boy because the little boy was his brother's friend.
Mm.
Wow.
So that's the kind of crap that I'm coming from, right? And you know, it is what it is. I had.
So we talked about this before. There's people who, you know, have something to say but never have a lived. Well, everybody has a lived experience, but some people's lived experiences are different. And so you have a pretty raw lived experience, and so that's I like you digging into that background. But keep going.
Oh yeah, for sure. And so like when I was, I had a pretty good. My grandma taught me how to read when I was like super little. Unlike some kids didn't get that, so I was very smart, I guess, in comparison to people at my school. Not because I was smarter than them, but because I was just ahead of them in reading. And so I got an opportunity once I got out of elementary school to pick the middle school that I went to. And so I ended up picking like a white middle school. Not because it was white, but just because it wasn't in the hood where I was at. Because in the hood where I was at, you had metal detectors at middle schools. Mm. Think about what I'm saying. There's metal detectors at middle school because that's when the kids started. Like, so I'm coming from all of that. Unfortunately, my mom passed to Las Vegas, and Vegas was like way different. Like as far as sin, it wasn't different, but as far as like violence and all that stuff, it wasn't different. And from the longest time, I pride myself on working hard, getting a job, doing things, getting a degree. So right now, you know, I grind the way through all that stuff, and I got a degree in youth ministry. I ended up doing youth ministry for a little bit, for a lot of it actually, for almost 9 years. And then I have a master's degree. I was the youth ministry degree or the master's.
No, where did you do youth ministry? Like, where did you practice? Like,
I did youth ministry at Escondido. So it was the North County Church of Christ. That place was mostly Hispanic, Hispanic and white. It was like
because they had a Spanish service, right?
Yeah, exactly. They had a Spanish service. Pretty much they spoke all Spanish. A lot of illegal Hispanic people, but I ain't calling nobody out. But that's just the way it is. We love on them no matter what, because that's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to love on people regardless. And so I spent 9 years doing that, and it was amazing. I was at the same time doing my Master of Divinity and going to I was in the Navy full time, and then I got out of the Navy as a enlisted sailor, and then I came back in as a chaplain. So right now I'm a chaplain with a Master of Divinity from Azusa Pacific University. And, you know, I'm Black. I'm married to a white woman. My kids are mixed. And so when it comes to having like an opinion about everything, I'm not saying that I have the best opinion, but I would say that I have a real well-rounded opinion on race, because I still experience it being Black all the time. But then I also experience what it's like to have a white wife and live in certain circles and do certain things. And so I try to come from my experience, but I also try to come from my knowledge base when I speak on these things, and not just an opinion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you have a lot of different experiences, and you also said, maybe I missed in that you were a police officer for a period of time.
Oh yes, I was a police officer.
I don't know if I missed that one or not.
No, you didn't miss that. No, well, I didn't say it this time, but I was a police officer in Coos Bay, and so I have a different lens when it comes to that too. So it's like something like I can judge a little bit better whether or not the officer was right or wrong. But at the same time, like I was saying to you guys before, you know, you come up to a traffic stop, even if it's a young lady, you don't know who she is, what she's gonna do. She might have a warrant out for arrest. The guy next to her might have one. She might decide to take off. She might be protecting her boyfriend. You don't know. And so you should always be on edge with everybody, but it just seems to me that some people are on edge more when it comes to Black people, but that's just.
And
my
so,
opinion.
Javon, I'm curious because I think Marshall is going to either edit in. I don't think we're going to play the video, but we watched the video that you kind of, the viral video that you put out last time, and it was cool. But
I've been trying to hold my thoughts in my head, but I can't do it anymore. Before I go on a rant, I want to say I truly appreciate the people who are listening and have been empathetic with the black experience in America. This isn't for you, but I truly appreciate you listening anyway. I'm still frustrated, man. I'm frustrated about three things. One, Christianity being used as a front to care about injustices. Two, some black people thinking two wrongs make a right. And three, people who like pointing out the wrong, talking about the wrong before empathizing with the injustice of the black society. I'm frustrated with Christianity because I'm not sure we know what love truly is. 1 John 4:7-8 says this, "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God because God is love." Did you catch that? Whoever does not love does not know God because God is love. Do we love how God loves? I get it. We might say the right things, like we might say, let's pray for the world, or we need more love in the world. We just need Jesus in our community. And we're great at posting verses. But what does that really do? We're acting like the disciples when Jesus fed the 5,000. They told Jesus, hey, why don't you send the people away so they can get something to eat? But Jesus' reply was, why don't you give them something to eat? You see, he's telling them, don't you know that you have the power of God working in you? Don't you know you have the power to change people's circumstances with your actions? You do something about injustices, Christians. Talk is cheap. Instead of simply praying for the world, how about we be the light in the world? Instead of saying we need more love, how about we just show more love with our empathy and our compassion? Instead of hoping for more Jesus, how about we become more like Jesus, who, in the very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing, taking on the very nature of a servant. We need to be serving the people whose voices cannot be heard. We need to be present with them, building a relationship with them, understanding them. That way, when you post your verse about not repaying evil for evil, it won't fall on deaf ears because they know that you've been with them, loving them, present with them the whole time. Jesus did this so well that they labeled him a sinner. Christians, you might be labeled a supporter of Black Lives Matter or Antifa when you finally choose to fully understand and defend the black plight in America. But so what? Isn't it more important that you love? Isn't it more important that you stand against evil? Or is your opinion more important than the gospel? Black people, I get it. We've been in this thing. Our parents have been in this thing. Our ancestors have been in this thing since the foundation of this country. And even if things have gotten better and to the point where they are today, it seems like we're still in this thing and things haven't changed. Eric Gardner, Tamir Rice, Philando Castile, George Floyd. Those are just some of the voices that echo from the grave for change. Yet they say Colin Kaepernick's protest was too disrespectful even though it was peaceful. Then they tell us to peacefully protest like Dr. King, not remember that Dr. King was murdered for protesting like that. They say, don't put your fist in the air. Don't sit at this counter. Don't peacefully assemble, or else we'll spray you down with fire hoses and throw you in jail. Just sit over there like good little Negroes and be happy that we elected the first black president. Despite all this frustration, despite centuries of murder and abuse, inequality and racism, we have to do a better job of bringing about real change. You have to understand that this thing is systematic, from the Three-Fifths Compromise to the Fugitive Slave Act, from Plessy versus Ferguson to the Dred Scott decision. It is systematic, so it has to be changed systematically, as all those cases were. So rioting when we don't get our way may give us a temporary high, but it does not give us the permanent change that we are seeking. It needs to be demanded by electing people in our local governments who will bring about the systematic change that matters to us. It needs to be demanded that the local police departments get better training on how not to kill people and get the local government to enforce it. And if they don't enforce it, vote them out and get somebody in there that will. This system wasn't created overnight, so it's not going to be fixed overnight. But it's definitely not going to be fixed by burning down your own cities. We actually lose the message when we do that. People who like pointing out the wrong first. I know that made you happy to hear, and that's the problem. You want that to be said and have us move on to the status quo. Well, I got news for you. The status quo ain't working. There's yet another dead, unarmed black man being buried. Did you hear that? Another human being has lost his life. But instead of having empathy for the situation, you wait. You wait until the victims feel so victimized that they lash out. And once they lash out, here you come blaming them for doing something wrong. Let the system play out, you say. But the system is the problem. Most of the murders of unarmed black people weren't even convicted. Most of those murderers weren't even convicted, man. Protest this way, you say. But Colin Kaepernick did this peacefully and lost his whole career. All lives matter, you say. We know that, Sherlock Holmes. We're just saying it seems like our lives have been mattering less in this country, and your lack of recognizing any part of that is the problem. Despite things being on videotape, you say, well, he must have did something wrong. He shouldn't have resisted. You know, you can't be reasoned with. Because you're right. Kneeling down for the national anthem is disrespectful. And looting to bring about change is criminal. The problem is we wouldn't be doing any of that if we were being heard, if we weren't being murdered. We scared, man. We're scared for our future. We're scared for our babies. We're scared that the next time we get pulled over, we're going to get shot with our kids in the car. We're scared that we're going to get shot in our own houses. We're scared that when we beg for our lives with a knee on our neck, we still going to get murdered. It's sad. After a civil war, after all the court cases, after all the sit-ins, after all the protests, after all the civil rights acts, after all the amendments to a broken system, we still out here fighting to be equally valued. Breonna Taylor, say her name. Sandra Bland, say her name. Walter Scott, say his name. Say their name, won't you say their name? This whole country is sad, man. Everybody out here trying to be right about something when people out here really dying. Everybody got an opinion about something while mothers out here burying their own children. You ain't supposed to outlive your child, man. People out here trying to prove that they're not racist while literally being racist. Martin Luther King said this: the ultimate measure of a person is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. You'd think we'll all be on the same page, right? I mean, this is the United States of America. I guess certain truths aren't really that self-evident, though.
But give us in broad brush strokes your take, because you've set the table really nicely for having a really sort of diverse opinion on the political climate right now. You've got the experience of being a police officer, having a white wife and running in those circles, but you've also come from, you know, the hood is what you say, and you've had that experience. So give us your take in a broad brush stroke of what do you think, who's at fault right now and what is going on and what's your take on it?
Who's at fault for what exactly?
Well, I feel like there's just a lot of tension.
Yeah, who's
and
at fault for what?
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of tension. Good question. There's a lot of tension right now, and it feels very race driven, but it feels like it's oppressed versus oppressor. Like who, you know, is that a race related thing, do you think, or do you feel like it's police with more minority groups, or do you feel like it's just a big misunderstanding and we should all be able to figure it out as a group? Like, what is your take on that?
So to answer it bluntly, I think it I don't know if I want to say it so simple as a misunderstanding, but I will contend that is true, that it is a lack of wanting to understand, right? And so it's interesting as we navigate through some of these things, right? Some of these narratives, right? I watched the video of Elijah McClain, and I don't know if you guys heard about him. He was an autistic young man who had a mask on. He was walking out just down the street past police officers. Police officers stopped him because he looked suspicious. You don't it's frustrating because the young man ended up dying, right? And so one of the narratives that happens in that situation, because he was resisting arrest even though he wasn't being arrested, people are like, well, he shouldn't have been resisting arrest if he would have just did what he was supposed to do and all this stuff. And so all these narratives get caught into it, and it's like, why is that narrative being brought up? Because I feel so frustrated. Instead of you looking at it as a human being, it's like looked at it in the race form. And I think the reason why it's looked at it that way is because for whatever reason, even though people don't want to admit it, our country is founded on racism. You know what I mean? And so it is in our DNA. Like, it hasn't been stripped when we made the first black president. It wasn't stripped when we put Bill Cosby on TV. It wasn't stripped when Oprah became a billionaire. It's always been there. And so what the narrative that happened, right, is that we as people need to recognize that is at the not only at the foundation of our nation, but it's still like present. And I think what happens, right? Someone like you or someone like you got both of you guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
You look at yourself, you're like, well, I'm not racist. And that's fine. Like, you're not. Like, you, and we think about racism, we think, oh, Ku Klux Klan, I hate black people, this is this. But what happens is that for the longest time, a lot of the racial overtones from racist people back in the day are still said today, but people don't think they have racial overtones. So when they say something simple as black on black crime, okay, all right, black people kill black people at a 90% rate, but white people kill white people at an 85% rate. Why? Because neighbors kill neighbors. So just the very nature of saying black on black crime is racist. Because no one ever says white on white crime, or Mexican on Mexican crime, or Chinese on Chinese crime, even though they kill each other at the same rate. You want to know why? Because they live next to each other. Most white people live around white people.
Just curious of your take, and I want to play a lot of devil's advocate in this, so I hope you don't take it the wrong way. But at the same time, you don't see white people and Chinese people at the forefront claiming that they're oppressed. Like, sure, that white on white crime happens, and sure, that Chinese on Chinese crime happens, admittedly, for sure. But you also don't see those nationalities asking for anything or claiming to be oppressed. And again, devil's advocate, I'm just curious of your take.
No, it's true. It's true. That's because white people in America aren't oppressed. They think they are somehow, some way. Somebody decide, oh, affirmative action hurts me. I don't know, but they're not oppressed. They haven't been oppressed, and from the beginning, they've been the oppressor. You know what I mean? And so it's like that's out of the question. Chinese people get it like just any immigrant gets it, right? So when the Irish came over here, when German came over here, like my wife's great grandfather told his kids not to speak German because he just wanted to be American, right? So they just want to assimilate into being American. Well, it's a little easy to assimilate into America when you look like what they expect Americans to look like. It's a little harder when you look like the people that have been oppressed since the beginning, since we've been here the whole time. And so it's easier for a lot of Chinese people coming here, and the black people work hard too. The problem with it is you got Black Wall Street, right? I don't know if you guys ever heard of this, where they had this whole area of black people in black towns, and the government destroyed that. And so that's just one example. And you can go from the time they got freed as slaves to all the way till now. It's just repeated oppression to keep black people from experiencing things or having things or redlining them into certain neighborhoods or fill in the blank. It doesn't matter. And so when you see the end result, right, when you see what you see, like let's say take Chicago, that's from years. That's from years of the other stuff. That's not just like, oh yeah, we woke up today.
I think Chicago has some leadership issues too. But I do have a question.
They have some of that too.
Because you're in, and maybe not everybody knows this, but you're in Tokyo, Japan right now. Right?
I am.
So if there's any sort of lag or anything, that might be an experience, that might be an explanation. But one of the things that I was just talking to somebody about, that we were doing house church, and they were over here, and we were talking about World War II and how she's of Japanese descent. And she said, well, my grandfather was in an internment camp in the United States.
Right.
And you go, ooh, those are some of the things that are looked over. And so I think there are some other races that definitely do get oppressed. But going to Aaron's point, you don't hear them as outspoken right now. And maybe that's because there's just not an instance in which, if you're saying that Chinese people kill the Chinese people at the same rate, and Mexicans kill Mexicans at the same rate, and whites kill whites at the same rate, I don't know if there's a stat for Japanese in this country too, but to Aaron's point, they're not saying, hey, we're oppressed people here. And what might you attribute that to be?
Well, there's a combination of a lot of things, right? So the first thing is that even when they are oppressed, like let's say take the Irish, right? Let's just take something so simple as Irish people. They got super oppressed here, right? At the time that America had its first Irish president, right? Remember, they had their first Irish president. Black people still couldn't vote. Are you understand? Are you following me? So even though they were oppressed, for however long they were oppressed for. Everybody, it seems like when everyone else comes here, they get oppressed and they're not oppressed no more.
Sure.
But Black people have been oppressed all the way through. Like it just does not stop.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great point.
Right.
And one of the things that I take issue with right now is because I go, yeah, there's some dark history that hopefully we don't lose, right? I mean, one of the things that, my son shows me things all the time where, there's already young people in our colleges that are losing what the Holocaust was really about. I mean, when they hear Hitler killed millions of Jews, they're like, millions? Are you sure it was millions? And that's super concerning, right? And so you don't want them to forget the history. But I do worry that we talk about race so much that when you say, oh, Marshall, you're not racist, so it's the other people, and so you're not thinking about it as much. And I go, yeah, that's true, but I don't want to have to teach my kids too much to be like,
right.
I guess one of the things going on right now, I'll just give you an example. I don't know if you heard this, but they're going to sing the Black national anthem in the NFL for the first week, and then my kids are going to go, well, what is the Black national anthem? And so then I have to talk about there being a racial divide. When you go, why can't there be more unity in it? Why is that something that exists? Why can't it be a national anthem for everybody? What's the
I agree with you. And when it comes to national anthem, there's a lot of how can I say it, a lot of overtones. If you look at the whole national anthem when it first was created, it talks about getting rid of the slave or killing the slave, and then they instead they secretly decided that we're going to put only the first verse. The verse is not talking about doing bad things to slaves and a white nation and all this stuff. And so I think what happened, here's what happens, right? So let's just take Black History Month before we talk about the Black National Anthem.
Okay.
The reason why Black History Month exists is because the Black history wasn't represented, right? And so when we talk about certain things that happen in Black history, you get your history and it says Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King, slavery, everything's good now. And you're just like, I wish it was that simple. If only it was that simple, but it isn't. And then we highlight these people, and they were strong contributors to America, but then they don't highlight the Black people that were strong contributors to America. And it's just because, and then we have to wait to Black History Month. It's a whole bunch of like nuances that kind of were created before we got to 2020 that I think that our generation can't fix. But until it gets fixed, it is important. Now let's go back to the Black National Anthem. It's kind of like them getting rid of Aunt Jemima. I can't think of her name. I can't say her
Aunt
name.
Jemima.
They're doing certain things to like take down certain shows and stuff like that. Look, in the end,
Uncle Ben's rice.
Yeah, that's crazy. In the end, I just want y'all to stop killing unarmed Black people. That's it.
Yeah.
Like all that stuff is
and
ain't gonna help nobody.
So do you think that things like no more Aunt Jemima, what was it? Was it cereal
maple
or
syrup.
something?
What is wrong with you guys? It's maple syrup. You guys not eat maple syrup?
I know what it is. I just don't know how to say the.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's going by the wayside, and things like the Washington Redskins are going by the wayside, and they're tearing down statues of in 2016 it was Confederate statues, and now it's Frederick Douglass statues and Abraham Lincoln statues. It's like, so I'm curious if you are concerned about sort of this just demolishing of history, even though that history does have racism in it, of course. Do you worry about what it looks like if we just completely erase history like that?
I agree. I think there's two separate situations, right, that we have when we have this discussion, right? What is history and what should be idolized or memorialized, right? So like some of the stuff I believe needs to be maybe in a history museum and should be in history because it happened. Like you like when I give you my testimony as a Christian, I'm gonna give you all the bad too that I did. I have to. I have no choice because like that's who I am. That's what made me. That's how I got to this point. And without the bad, you don't know what you see in front of you today. And I feel that stuff is important. The problem with it is in some of these states, like let's just take the Confederate flag for a reason, this treasonous flag that only lasted 6 years. They literally had the flag, created another nation so they can own people, so they can enslave people, Like, that's bad. But then they decided, oh, we're just going to, even though we lost, we got our butt whooped, we're going to put our flag up everywhere you see in the South. That's crazy to me. Like, so some stuff like that needs to come down. People that they idolize as generals and people that literally kill black people or kill other people because they want to have people as slaves. Yeah, that stuff needs to come down. But
And you've been all over the United States, so you've probably seen the Confederate flag, like the difference between what the Northwest looks like versus when you go to the South and you're like, man, they wear that thing like there's something to stand for, right? I mean, it's on the Capitol. Well, just recently got taken down in some of the capitals in some of those states.
Exactly. I've been to Mississippi. It was everywhere. I've been to Tennessee. That junk was everywhere. I've been not Georgia as much. I guess you got to go to the backwoods. I only been to Atlanta, but like, most of the South is like, I'm like, man, this is crazy. And I only find offense to it because I know what it means. But I think a lot of people just have it because that's what they're used to, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't really blame them. I'm not sitting up there saying that people are racist. I know tons of people who have Confederate flags and had Confederate flags in the military, and they were the nicest people ever. So I don't think that
it's just their country or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, or something, or heritage, or whatever they want to call it. I don't know what that means. All I know is that flag was considered treason, and they left this country, and they're treasonous, and they lost, and they shouldn't be recognized, right? But we should. But if, let's say, for instance, you were at your, I'm not saying this is what should happen, but if you did have that in your family history from 200 years ago, and you had a little memorial or thing in your house with that stuff up, I don't think you're racist for saying, hey, my great grandfather, he fought for the Confederacy. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Like, nothing's wrong with that. It happened. Like, you're not promoting it. You're just saying, hey, I'm just recognizing that my great grandfather's fought.
Well, there's some. I know there are some. There is some history that some people are ashamed of. When me and my wife took a trip to England, and apparently my great somewhere in my lineage is the Cromwell, and apparently Cromwell was a king that went and like demolished a lot of people and killed a lot of people. And they have this museum, and even where the museum was placed, it felt uncomfortable going in there. But you just felt like you were sinning almost going in there because you're like people don't like him, and so you go in there, but you're like, yeah, but this is also history. And so my wife's like going, I just want to see what, this was, not that we want to glorify it or we like it. And I hopefully want no part in it, and I'm glad that name didn't stick and went down a different rabbit hole for my last name. But it is a part of history that is worth knowing to know, yeah, that's not something I want to do.
But I also agree that like black kids shouldn't be forced to go to Robert E. Lee school. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, really? Like, this dude was trying to literally keep you as slaves. He literally left the Union to join the Confederacy because of state rights, I guess, or being a Virginian. And he decided that he was going to try to fight for white people to keep your ancestors as slaves. That's kind of messed up. So if we're going to glorify history, we should glorify history in the right way. We should glorify history in the right way where we're idolizing the Union generals and soldiers and people who actually fought for the right side, for the side that actually matters, for the side that won, by the way. But I'm not get rid of history just because it makes us uncomfortable.
So in broad brushstrokes, you do feel like this whole movement of tearing down every piece of history and all these statues is, objectively speaking, is a bad idea. Like, I get it with the Confederate flag. I think that that's valid. But there's some of them, I mean, it's getting out of control. And I think we talked about this a little bit last time. Like, where do you see this ending up? Because it seems to me, as a white person, obviously a different perspective than yours to some degree, it feels like it's turning the two races against one another. It seems like intentionally inflammatory. And I think that that's probably going to,
it's getting scary.
It's not going to help things. So I think it was an interesting take you had. And I wanted to know what you think about sort of the direction that is going politically right now.
Yeah, I think unfortunately that is true. It's going to turn people against each other because, like you're saying, it frustrates me what you just said because I agree with you 100%. And when you don't have room to actually have a conversation like we're doing right now, when you don't have that room to do that. It's real easy to just go onto your side and go into your little tribe and go into your little shell and say, well, I'm for people that look like me. I mean, we kind of do it in simple terms, right? I'm watching, and maybe I'm the only one, but maybe I'm the only one that admit it. I'm watching American Idol. I see a black girl singing. I'm start rooting for the black girl.
Nah.
like I'm
Yeah,
just like,
fair.
but if it's like two white dudes that's better than her, I'm like, oh no.
Eh.
Well, don't you think that kind of happened with Obama a little bit? I mean, he got the vote just because he was a black man, right?
For sure, I agree with that 100%.
For some people, obviously not for everybody. So I think one of the questions I like to ask, because I tell people this a lot, and I was with a group of friends the other day, and I said, it feels like as a white person, especially a white male, heterosexual, I get the least say in this country. I'm not a minority in any way, shape, or form. I guess if I was to switch and be gay, that's going to be controversial. Me just saying that right there, then I would be a minority. But I get no voice whatsoever right now. I'm not allowed to say anything, and so the only thing I can do is either jump onto a Black Lives Matter movement, or I don't get to say anything. And I don't like the position that I'm in right now, because I feel like I have a lot of good thoughts. There's things that I want to teach my children. There's things that I want to do to make sure I influence others, because I can be an influential person to others to make sure they're thinking in the right direction. But I don't like the fact that I'm looked at that I can't. What is somebody like me, or people in that situation, what do they do? Or what would you suggest that they do? Or how do they, I guess, how do they help the cause?
I think no, I understand, because a lot of times, and what's frustrating about anything, because even within the post that I made about the American flag and loving my country, but recognizing the imperfections of this country, I had Black people that did not agree with that, and Black people who said, 4th of July, what was your ancestors doing on 4th of July, blah, blah, blah. So even I, as a Black person, get this pushback from Black people. So it's a little tough, right? It's a little tough to, okay, well, I'm trying to support, I'm trying to help, I'm trying to do this, but then every time I do, they like, oh, you're not Black, you don't understand, you don't get it. And then we like, okay, well, I'll try to get it. And then you hear some of the stuff that they say, and you're just like, man, I don't think I want to support all of that. I want to support this. I want to support all of what y'all are saying. It's crazy. And I think with everything, you have that, right? You have, if you're a Democrat, you be like, yeah, I agree with this, this, and this. And then they start talking about something way off the wall. So you're like, what in the world? And if you're a Republican, you're like, I agree with this, this, and this. And then they start talking about crazy stuff. You're like, man, okay, off the rocker. And I think our tendency, right, is to accept this all or nothing type of mentality. Like, either I'm for Black Lives Matter or I'm against it.
Yeah.
Either I'm for the Black movement or I'm against it. Well, I gotta be against it because I'm white. You know what I mean? Because every time I try to be for it, they tell me this. And I'm like, what, especially for a Christian, right? One of the things that we have to understand is that we have to be for what's right no matter what. Does that make sense? So I think what I would tell someone who's in that situation, you have to be for what's right no matter what. And sometimes that requires a lot of, I don't know what the word, like humility, a lot of understanding,
willing to be wrong, willing to be, not only willing to be wrong, but willing to be wronged.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I was just about to say. Willing to understand that when you enter these conversations with some people, they're coming from a deep, deep hurt place. And they might say some things and do some things. It was funny. I was watching Save the Last Dance. It's funny. I'm dating myself. I was watching Save the Last Dance today. And one of the incidents happened where the ex-girlfriend of the Black guy got upset at the girl. She told her some stuff about herself. You white women always come in here and you take our men, right? And so she goes and tells the sister, the Black sister, hey, this girl said that to me. And then she was like, is she wrong though? and so like, she's like, really? Like, okay, wow, I thought you would be on my side. I'm dating your brother and you think that she's right about that? And then she went off on this girl, and then she realized later, wow, I was out of place for she was coming at it from a place of like understanding that situation. Like, there's a lot of hurt in that, in seeing a Black man date a white woman for Black women, especially the good ones, because the rest of them are dead or in jail or deadbeats. And so you got to understand that when you come into these situations, these conversations, you're going to get a lot of like well, white people this and white people that, and this, blah, 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 and your people, blah, and they're gonna say that and don't take it personal.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't take it personal, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
What
Well,
I'm
I
saying?
think somebody told me this the other day. They're like, "Hey, Marshall, one of your superpowers is that you don't take anything personally." And so, yeah, I don't take things personally, but I do wonder how you have an effective voice. Maybe that's a better
Right.
term. How do I have an effective voice where I can, actually state my opinion without being called a racist?
Right. I think, unfortunately, in this climate, you probably will be. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm explaining it from my experience, not just from like being racist or anything, but just being myself. Right. Me being me, deciding to get an education, deciding to do things better for myself, deciding to be better about all the things, the choices I make, and speaking correctly. You know how many times by my family members and other Black people, oh, you act white, you talk white, you're corny. It happens all the time. It happens over and over again. I just can't get used to it. Right? Because I am not going to allow their negativity to defeat my purpose in life. So I don't look at them and like, hey, you know, they're speaking from whatever warped lens that they're looking at. I don't understand how being educated and speaking correctly and talking is white, and I don't understand it. But that you're going to get it no matter what. I think you have to realize that you're going to probably get that no matter what, because certain people cannot look past themselves because they feel that they're correct. I posted a thing on Instagram about a young Martin Luther King had did the call to action for all the in the Birmingham gym for all the ministers, the white ministers, and some of the white ministers that came out, a lady and a man had got killed during that particular time, and I posted that on my page, the white guy for Black History Month, because I do a Black History Month thing every month. And one of my Black friends was like, why you post this white man on here? He knows his heritage, blah, blah, blah. She was like going off on me because I posted a white dude. I was like, wait a minute, this white dude died for us. He didn't die for us. He ain't no white savior, blah, 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 blah. You know, and I'm like, so like, I get that from her almost every time. Anytime I post a white person, I get that from her. And I just know that that's who she is, how she thinks, and I try to talk to her and process her down. But I don't defriend her. I don't start being loving towards her. I just realize that more than likely I'm going to continue to get that. And unfortunately, more than likely from some people, not all people, you're Black people, you're going to get a very like, well, you don't understand, or why you even care, whatever. To make you feel bad about it.
You said a couple of things that are really interesting. I hope I can remember to touch on both of them. But the one thing I noticed about you, Javon, I mean, I noticed a lot of things, but you've got this really cool story of kind of coming from a rough place. And you said it sounds like you kind of willed it into fruition. Like you just made your life happen. You're like, I'm not going to be a statistic. I think you said that last time. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think that's such a inspiring story for anybody, Black, brown, white, or anything like that, who's coming from a rough place, that, hey, there's still a place in this world if you make some good decisions to get out of that. And it sounds like you came from a particularly rough environment, you know, with some of the stories that you told. So I'm curious why you think that is not more of the narrative than the narrative being just racism is going to get you, and again, I'm coming from my perspective, but why do you think that is such the more popular narrative is racism is going to get you, it's out there and it's going to pull you down, rather than hearing more of the narrative like what you're telling us, which is, yes, it's rough out there, but follow my lead and I can show you how you could get out of this.
Okay. So there's a lot to that. And I'm going to give you, can I give you guys a longer answer so I can start where we started, like with the 60s, right? You got the 60s. That narrative played out and it was correct. That narrative was correct in the 60s and 63 and 64, 65, up until we get civil rights, right? It was correct. It still probably was correct up into the 70s, right? Where it was still kind of like racism is going to get you down. The problem with it is that now is that like you start seeing, you know, the 80s had a lot of Black faces on TV, a lot of Black people doing well for themselves. BET was created about 40 years ago in the 70s, 79, 80. Like you see a lot of good, positive things that happen, but you got to understand from 1619 until 1968, I mean 65, it it was that way for Black people. And so now take all of that without going into detail, right? And then you realize that my mom was born in 63, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they got all of this backwards, 16, 19, grandma, grandpa, all this racism, the war on drugs, all the kind of stuff that happened to them in the 80s and the 90s. And it just keeps piling on, despite people being successful. But unfortunately for most Black people, not all, a lot of Black people, we only see success as uber success. So we idolize Jay-Z and Lil Wayne and LeBron and stuff. Like, we can't be 6'8", 240, you know, but we're gonna play basketball, right? We can't be run a 4.3 in the 40, but we're gonna play football because that's what we feel like we can get out of our situation with. So you couple a lot of those things with the actual oppression before, people saying, hey, we're oppressed, and then you take into account this. I'm gonna read a couple things to you guys so you can understand that, like, even though like you're pushing through as a Black person, it doesn't change our situation. So at Harding Simmons University, a student posted a racist video on the campus website. That happened in June 2020. Oklahoma City University, a heckler on a Zoom graduation held up a swastika that had a racial slur on it as a Black valedictorian gave his speech. That happened May 2020. At Southern Oregon University, a racial slur was written on the door of an African-American student. That happened in March 2020. I'm not saying every Black person experienced racism, but there's racism everywhere. I just gave you 3 different cities that had it in 2020.
Yeah, and I think the problem too,
right,
with the difference between, if you call me a derogatory term, there's not really much that's going to dig inside my skin a lot, right?
Not
I mean,
really.
in my history, there's not a lot that you can say there. I can't really think of anything.
Right.
But you know, when you're talking about a Black person, yeah, there's some words that you can use. There's a swastika symbol, and maybe for a Jewish person, it's going to mean a lot more. As a white Jewish, but me as a Anglican, you know, person, there's no words, there's no symbols that's really going to cut into so if I'm graduating or giving a speech and somebody holds something up, I'm probably going to laugh it off. Where if they hold it up for you, it's going to be a little bit different. So I definitely can see that difference.
Right. And so what you have is like I said, I've been to 34 states and I've experienced racism in each of them. You know, a lot of it's subtle, but a lot of it's very blatant to the point where even in liberal Portland, Oregon, I've had people throw water bottles at me and call me the N-word. I mean, everybody's tough in a car.
Well, listen, I think Portland, Oregon will jump on any bandwagon if there's a riot that's gonna. I think they're gonna just jump on it because that's what they're looking for something. But that's just my personal opinion.
No, I agree. And so when I couple that with my experience, right, I can see how Black people can come up with the narrative that, hey, it's the white man that's holding me down. It's the white system. It's this, is that. And while I tend to understand and maybe to an extent agree, but not 100%, not even 50%, I still also am very determined. That's just me. I'm very determined to make my own way. Like I just have a different personality. I've been ever since I was little, I was like, man, I need to get out of the hood. Like I was just done with the hood. Like I didn't want to have no part of that. And so that was just me. I was determined. Some people, they determined too, but then you just kind of get caught in the thing that's happening. So let's say, for instance, you're 16 years old and you find I'm gonna be determined. I'm gonna do my thing. And then you over there working at McDonald's, doing your thing. And then your homie come up, roll up with you, got nice car that he bought. He got $5,000 in his pocket. Talk about, man, how McDonald's working out for you, bro? Like I made as much as you make in a year, in one day, in 1 week, in 1 month. You know, like you made that in a year. And so that's super enticing, man. Especially when you see this, when this happens, right? So remember, my best friend got shot when he was 18, right? He was on the right track. He was going to college. He had graduated high school, all that stuff, but he got killed anyway. So when you see that, you're like, well, if I'm gonna get killed anyway, why would I try to do the long route? Why would I try to do some stuff that's going to set me up? And when I'm 40, I might not live to see 40. I might not live to see 18 or 20. And so it's a little bit different when you have that scenario. And so it's harder for for Black people in those areas to overcome a lot of that stuff.
But
Because does that make
so
sense?
yeah, it does make, it makes a lot of sense. And I want to be clear that when I say the narrative, I don't mean a false narrative. It is, I
Right,
think a lot,
right,
I think everything you're
right.
saying absolutely happened 100%. I was just meaning more like when you watch the news, you see more of the headlines are about racism, and you don't see as much
Yeah,
about pro Black
yeah,
and pro achievement and the stories of the
oh
people
yeah,
like you who make it.
Oh,
And so I
achievement.
just wondered, and I think that as you just said, you know, when you were young, you know, working at McDonald's versus the guy who's selling the drugs, and it's like, well, if I'm going to get killed anyway, I may as well just, you know, hustle until I'm dead. And I'm
but I'm
curious,
bad.
don't you think that narrative on the news right now that basically exacerbates that and says, yeah,
Yeah,
you're right, the racism is going to get you, so you might as well just take the easy route? I mean, don't you think that makes it
I
worse?
agree. I agree. I agree. It makes it 100% worse because unfortunately, that's kind of what they want, and they and, and it sells, right. It doesn't sell that work done. He's a former running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He decided that he is going to create a foundation that helps single moms who are working single moms, and he buys them a house. That that good news story for like 5 seconds, but that's not what's gonna get the pundits talking and each other. So I agree with you 100%. They don't talk about Brandon Marshall having his foundation that helps with health athletes and anybody, little baby. But that's what got the headlines because it was controversial. And I think that narrative needs to be talked about, but I don't think it needs to be all encompassing, where it's 95% of the time we're talking about how bad everything is. And everybody's like, defund the police. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, just how about you just give them better training so that they don't kill Black people? Like, why are we defunding them? why don't we give them better training on how not to escalate a situation? And I get it. Like I said, I've been in situations. I've been in a situation where I had to pull my gun on someone. It's nerve-wracking, man. Like, that's not a good position to be in when you think that you're gonna die. Yeah, like, it's not a good position. It is definitely something that I think needs to be fixed, but I think it is fixed by not necessarily paying attention to the news, but paying attention to your Black friends and the Black people around you and the people that you come in contact with. Because when you start thinking about it, you're like, man, like, people aren't really racist. Like, our overall tone isn't right. Now, you go to the South, that's a different story. I ain't talking about the South. I'm talking about, like, overall, like, people aren't just like, oh, there's a Black person, I hate them.
Yeah, but
like,
I think what has happened now though is it's gotten so far reaching that it's like, instead of it being recognizing there's a difference, right? There's a difference between me and you.
Right.
There's a difference culturally between how you grew up versus how I grew up versus how Aaron grew up. I mean, there's going to be the difference between three of us. There's going to be the difference between Hispanic and Indian and Japanese. They just have cultural differences. And now if you point those cultural differences out and you say, well, you know, this is what Black people like to do, and oh, that's racist. You know, you can't even say that anymore. And you're like, but they like to do that. So, or you know, they're really good at this, and you're just not allowed to general stereotypes that are factual stereotypes. I don't even know that they're stereotypes, just factual statistics. You can't even information. There you go. That you can't even say anymore without being accused of being called racist. So it's like you can't even use ethnicity in any sort of description, and it's becoming a little tough. Aaron and I talked about this a while back, but I'm curious what your take is. You know, when I talk about what do we do, because there's this Black Lives Matter movement that I said is founded on Marxism, which I think is it's just not biblical. It's just not aside from it not being biblical, it's just not good. I don't think it's a good movement. And then you have what is continually unifying universally and specifically in the United States, is working towards a common goal. You have it in definitely in any sort of sports. You have it in the workplace. You have it in fraternities, and then I would say you probably have it in the military. When you have a common goal, you don't care about the gender, the sexual orientation, or the race of that person. When you have a common goal, you guys are all just together. You're working in it, and you're trying to reach that common goal. So how do we? What would be the organization, or what would be the movement right now to get everybody to, like, let's work towards a common goal and break down some of those barriers?
Unfortunately, I don't think there is an organization or a movement that's happening, because I think everybody, when they have a movement or organization, they tend to only focus on what their agenda is. So like, and I'm not picking on the homosexual community, but like homosexual, lesbian, LBG, they focus on homosexual stuff. They weren't worried about nothing else. So it's kind of hard to get everybody in on it, because it's like either you accept it or you're against it. They think too. And so I think where it starts.
Well, you either accept it or you hate them.
Exactly, which is not true, but that's what they say. And not just, I'm not talking about homosexuality or black people. I'm just talking about any group that assembles. And so that makes it hard. But I feel that the best way to do what you're trying to accomplish, it has to come from the church. And unfortunately, like I said earlier, where do I get the most like backlash from? Unfortunately, I get most of the backlash from Christians. And I'm just like, really? Like, are you reading your Bible? Do you actually understand who Jesus really is? Do you actually understand that Jesus actually stood with the marginalized? Do you realize that when Jesus is doing what he's doing, the Pharisees say to his disciples, why does he hang out with sinners? You must be a sinner because he's hanging out with sinners. Just because he's hanging out. Jesus didn't make a mistake in life. Yet because he was hanging out with people who were doing bad, the marginalized, the people who were oppressed, he got labeled that. And I think that, I don't know what it is, white privilege, Christian privilege. I don't want to lose my situation in life. People are just afraid that if they do that, that they're going to be the marginalized. And I'm like, yeah, regular people should be afraid of that, but Christians shouldn't be afraid of that, because our glory is not found here on earth, it's found in heaven. And so for us to sit up there and only focus on the Republican, Democrat, red, black, white, whatever, and not really look for our treasures in heaven, that's where I think we have a problem. I'm not talking about white church, I'm talking about black churches too. I want to say something. So one time, because I went to a mostly white college, I end up being in a mostly white neighborhood. I end up helping at mostly white churches. Well, I got a call to go help on the other side of town, to go help this other church. And I went to go help this other church, this black church, and it was going fine. Everything was going good, but it was like 20 minutes away, and we were poor college kids. I was like, I need to make some money a little bit. I'm not asking for full time, but like, can I get some part time? So I sat down with the pastor of the church. He took me to Applebee's, and we're doing our thing. We're talking, and I was like, so about maybe getting a little bit of money because we can't afford it. He's like, you know what? He's like, Brother Johnson, I'm gonna be honest with you. I think that you need to pay your dues. I'm like, excuse me? He's like, hey, what do you mean pay your dues? He was like, how many black churches you worked at? I was like, just yours, but I'm volunteering. I'm just doing it because he's like, it doesn't matter. You spend all your time at the white churches. You need to work for us for free like you work for them. Oh, okay. I literally got up and I left him with the bill because I didn't understand what was happening.
Yeah, that's a turnoff real quickly.
Right, I was super frustrated. I was like, wow. But I felt bad for the kids. I felt bad for the parents because they were expecting me to do something because I've been doing it for like 6 months. And so, but then you think about that if that came from a non-Christian perspective, I would have just dismissed it. Mm-hmm. But it hurt me to have it come from a Christian perspective. And so, and you get that on whether it's white side or black side or whatever, we just need to start with the racism that exists in our own churches. Come together.
I think there's something lacking in society right now, and
Mm-hmm.
specifically in the churches. I
Yep.
was just talking to some people the other day about it. I talked with my wife about it. I talked with my mom about it, and it's easy to see right now because there's some things exposed with, this whole COVID thing going on. I don't know how it's like over there in Japan, but they're shutting things down, and they're really oppressing what I say they're oppressing the churches. They're saying
Right.
you have to wear masks. It just came out in California that you can't even sing. The governor said no singing in
I,
churches.
I
And
saw that.
that's a rip. That's just ripping away freedoms. And what is missing right now is a lack of conviction. And I think
Mm-hmm.
within people and within the church, and when it comes
Yep.
to race, or when it comes into religious freedom, or when it comes into just really loving our country, we have a lack of conviction. And when you have a lack of
Yep.
conviction, you have a lack of knowing. And when you have a lack of history, when you lack knowing
Yep.
history, you can't speak. You can't speak with an educated mind. I can hear you
No.
and say you're speaking about specific dates that happen in history. And so you go, yeah, well, this is what happened here. And so this is what led to this. And this is what led to this. But a lot of
Right.
people don't know that. And a lot of people
Nope.
don't know what happened in history. So they it's that old classic cliche saying that if you don't know history, you're destined to repeat itself. Well, it's not. It was put there, but that saying was by a very smart person. And
Right.
we lack the conviction because we just don't have the knowledge to know where to go. And so we use all this proof texting. We take a scripture
Yep.
out, we take what somebody said on Facebook, and we repost
Yep.
it, not knowing what was before and what was after it. We don't know what
Ac-
Javon Johnson said at the beginning of his statement. We just took this one little piece, like you
Yep.
said, that we like, and we go, oh, you know what? It's just black people attacking other black people. And then
Right.
all of a sudden you don't hear everything else you said, right?
Right.
And so
Exactly.
we are a nation of absolutely doing that. And so we lack conviction. So because we lack conviction, and we're actually almost taught to lack conviction, really, within the
Yep.
church,
Yep.
you're
They're
told
so
these Bible stories, and you're told to just like, you know what, well, this is what my preacher told me, or this is what my parents told me, or this is what my friend, and you
right.
just blindly follow people. And when you blindly follow presidents, political leaders, your
Yep.
and your preachers, you don't do the research for yourself. You don't build a
Yep.
faith of your own. You don't build a conviction of your own. And then what
Yep.
happens is you just latch on to any movement that happens, and you
Yep.
go, I want so badly to have conviction. I don't know what it's for, so I'm going to latch on to your conviction, and I don't know if it's the
Exactly.
right one. And I feel like that's what's happening throughout the United States within
Yep.
just these movements, these protests, and within the church.
Yep. No, I agree with you 100%. But I feel that, like you just said, you said everything perfectly, and I feel that the church is the one place where you can do what you're desiring, where you can have a common ground, where we can have a common focus, because the common focus is Jesus. The common focus is God. The common focus is love. And so, if I can't convince you to love, I wonder if you're even a Christian anyway, right? And so, like, we have to be able to like we said earlier, be humble, put our pride aside, and just put ourselves in position to be led by God. And sometimes being led by God means being led into places you don't want to go, and we turn out to be Jonah. We're like, I don't really want to go.
He's going to
Right.
swallow you up and take you there anyway.
Right. He's gonna swallow you up and take you there anyway, right? And so, like, we have to not have that heart of Jonah. That's like, no, I don't want to, because I'm right about this. I'm right about that. You might be right, but God still loves everybody equally. And so, like, you gotta put yourself in a position to be used by God, to be loved, so that they can love people through God.
And not only that, I don't feel like we've had people who have faced hard times. I feel like there are some people that have some lived hard experiences, but
Yep.
for the majority of people, I just don't feel like they have that experience. I feel like they're
No.
latching onto something because they want so badly to have they want to have an experience, and they just don't have
Right.
them. And so right now, there's movements going on without any backbone behind it, or
Right.
any experience behind it. And I know we've talked about this a little bit, but we talk about it seems like it's just a redundant phrase that is almost losing its meaning, and it's called systematic racism, right? And they're like,
Right.
we've got to get rid of systematic racism. But I feel like a little bit of I don't know that I agree with systematic racism.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's lost its meaning because it's used so much.
Right.
And when you and I've asked you this, I go, well, what systematically in our country is racist right now?
Right.
And if you were to answer that, I mean, what would you say?
I would say it's not so. a lot of that stuff comes from, the terms come from the 60s when it was literally systematic. It literally was systematic, and a lot of it still is systematic, right? So when you think about just the simple war on drugs, right? Just the idea that if you get caught with crack or you get caught with cocaine, this is the 80s, right? And the 90s. You get caught with crack, you get caught with cocaine. Crack is mostly in the poor, Black, Hispanic neighborhoods. They got more of a jail sentence for the same drug. It just was created or used differently for that thing. And not only did they do that, get a less of a jail sentence, they didn't even serve half the sentence sometimes. And so,
Is that still going on today, Javon? The different sentencing? Do you feel like that's still a thing today?
it's not going on today as far as the drugs, but it's going on today as far as everything else.
Mm-hmm.
As far as everything else.
Like when you say everything else, like what
I'm talking about if somebody rapes someone, Black people tend to get higher. This is proven. Like I wish I could just look it up. It's proven. Like whether it's murder, rape, pick your crime.
You're saying whatever the crime is, the Black people serve higher sentences.
On average, get a higher sentence, and it's not close. I'm talking about not just in different counties in the same county. Like it's not like, oh well, this state law has a different minimum than this state law. No, in the same county, same city, same everything.
Why?
And so it's like,
why is that? I'm not saying I disagree with that. I'm just asking, why is that?
You tell me. And so like when you say you disagree with systematic racism, it's like, well, you tell me why that is. And so like so what I can't do is like go down the litmus of things and say, oh, here's where the systematic racism is. But what I can say is it's definitely in our jail system, and it's definitely in the way that we do our laws, but it's been that way since the beginning,
Well, I would 100%, and I've told you this before, like our criminal justice system
right.
is so amok right now. It's
right.
just, it's so convoluted and it's unfair. And
right.
I would agree with that. I think we talk about terms losing their meaning, and systematic racism, I feel like, is losing its meaning because you go, well, that's systematic. And you go, yeah, okay. So then how do we fix that? Because I think part of the problem, if we go back to G.I. Joe, knowing is half the battle, right? If we know the problem, then how do we attack it? But right now, it's so, Aaron loves to use a broad brushstroke. We have such a broad brushstroke of, well, we need to stop systematic racism. Well, what is systematic racism? And I think right there, you're starting to identify maybe a small sliver of it.
And I think it's kind of everywhere, right? So if you go even in the military, I was at the Marine Corps, just my last one, and I've seen now everybody most people that's officers are white, and most people that are enlisted are Black and Hispanic. That's just the way it was, the way it kind of fell out to be back in the day. Because remember, Black and Hispanics weren't allowed to be officers. So you think about why there's not as many officers and Black and Hispanic officers. That's part of the reason why, right? Now, let's fast forward, right? So you get that as the situation in 2019, 2018, right? And then you got a guy come up, he gets in trouble for a DUI, white guy. Another guy gets in trouble for the DUI, Black guy. Can you explain to me why the Black guy got kicked up but the white guy didn't?
Yeah,
and that happened over and over again. That's not what the one situation that happened at my command. It happened over and over again.
Well, and I think, Javon, that is good information. And I think maybe if we do this again, that would be good information to come with, because it's interesting stuff. And I think if that is the case, truly and statistically, that's appalling. And I think that that's a worthy cause for everybody to unite around. And I think that guys like Marshall and I, if we knew that to be the case and be true, of course, we would rally behind that. So I think that's that unity we're talking about. You did say something earlier that I'm curious about, which was Marshall kind of touched on, as a white guy, you know, it's like we don't have a voice, or we're kind of feel like we shouldn't talk, but yet people want us to help the cause, but they don't want us to talk. And something you said that I really wanted to touch on, which was, you know, be willing to listen and be willing to have your mind changed. Am I quoting you correctly?
Yeah. Right.
Okay. So I'm curious, and I have my own, this isn't just at you, this is me too. When was the last time in regard to something racial or systemic that you had your mind changed?
And I had my
about.
Well, I don't know if it's the last time, but I can talk from my experience? Do you want the last time or just any time?
The most important, whatever is most important to you. I'd love to hear it.
most important part is the reason why I'm in the military in the first place, right? So I remember growing up as a young black man, 13, 14, and getting this information of all the stuff that happened to all the black people back in the day and the stuff that's happened. Like basically, I'm angry. I hear all this stuff. I see these movies. I'm like, I can't believe this happening. So when I was 15 years old, I decided that Javon Johnson was not standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. It was not happening. Period. Any class I was in, it was not happening. Period. And let a teacher say something to me, and I go on a litany of things that tell you why I have the right to sit my black butt down and not listen to you, right? But that was just how I was. So then that translated just like Colin Kaepernick into like when I went to stadiums, I wasn't standing for the flag. It's just because I didn't want to. Like part of it's because I didn't want to, but part of it's a little bit conviction of like part of it's more like I don't believe in what this country kind of stands for, but I also don't believe that I should be forced to do something that I don't want to do. So it was a combination of both. And then I joined the Navy. And then I got more mature and I got more information. Like you guys were talking about earlier, information. I got more information and understanding that like, yeah, this country is imperfect, but there's a lot of people who fought in even more imperfect conditions, and they still said, I'm going to wear that flag. And they lived a life that said, you know what, even though this country's not living up to its ideals, where when I go back home, I cannot sit at any restaurant I want to, but I'm going to fight for it because I love my country and I love my people. And like just the idea of my mind changing on that, it's huge for me because I started seeing things more fully instead of just one-sided, instead of just from little perspective. And I could say I'm oppressed, maybe, I don't know, but I'm not as oppressed as they were in the 50s and the 60s. And so they were doing that in the 50s and 60s. I can only imagine, how fun time period.
Well,
yeah, that changed the most.
That is an interesting one. And I think that one of the reasons, and I think I told you guys this last time, I've told Marshall 100 times, one of the only reasons that I'm doing this podcast with Marshall is because I want to know more and I want to understand more. And I love when my mind gets changed or my opinion gets changed. And I think something we're seeing in society today, which really goes to Marshall's point about people latching on to a popular slogan of the day or a popular movement without fully understanding it, is younger people are getting married to an ideology without really understanding what they're representing. And so what they're doing is they're just representing an ideology without actually putting any of their personal experience into it. And then it's like you're not talking to a person. So sometimes I think when people like Marshall or when people like you are out talking to other folks, probably younger people is what I experience it with, you tend to talk to this person and realize they're not hearing anything you're saying. They're just looking at you as a privileged white person, or you think they're looking at you as a black person, and there's no real communication. It's just two people representing an ideology.
I agree. And so what you need to do, and here's the situation. It's almost like you need people to vouch for you, right? So I'm not saying people like me, but to be honest with you, people like me that's like in your area, in your neighborhood, wherever you do, and be like, talk to them first. Don't talk to the crazy people first. Talk to like them first, and then have them bring you into the circles, right? Have them like, so when you're having the conversation, don't just go have the conversation by yourself. Have the conversation with them. Like, hey, this is my buddy. Oh no, he's like, I can vouch for you. I'm like, no, he's cool. Like, like he's good. He's not like what you would get back and forth from certain people who are gonna actually, unfortunately, be like you, but like you're not gonna get that back and forth. And so I think that's super important to like build connections with people who are like you said I'm willing to have my mind changed. You have to build your connection with black people who are willing to have their minds changed, willing to be a little bit more flexible on the understanding. That doesn't mean that you agree. It just means that you will understand or consider or be like, I didn't consider that in my thinking. Maybe my thinking
it's tough
left or right.
And it's super tough because one of the harshest things that was said to me, and it was said not too long ago, they're like, well, you always have to be right. And I did not like that. I said, no, I don't always have to be right. But I realized that's a like, you can't win that argument because if you say, no, I don't always have to be right. And is me, but that statement really bothered me because that really, if you really take that statement to heart, it means you're not an open-minded person. It means you're
Exactly.
closed off to just your thinking.
Yeah.
But I would like to ask you, just because you're in Tokyo right now, and you're in, how many countries have you been to? Do you know?
Let me think about it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8.
8. Okay. Out of those 8 countries, and I think I've been to 10, maybe 11. It, what do you feel about the United? Is the United States one of the best countries, or do you feel like there's a better country out there?
Oh,
America.
America.
So I will say that as far as opportunity, as far as growth, as far as being able to be better, for me to be a poor black kid in Milwaukee to being a military person where I make more than my grandma made her pretty much her whole life, right? I think America is amazing and great. There's some things about America that needs to change, but I would pick America over any country, period. Now, here's what I will say. There's some things that I like about Japan. Out of all the places I've ever been, I never experienced racism in Japan. I've been here for 6 months.
But how diverse is Japan, though?
Right. It's just Japan. It's just Japanese people. They're super nice.
It's hard to be
Right.
racist when there's no other races.
It's true. I agree with you 100%. Here's what I know, though. I was on the train trying to get to the airport, and I couldn't figure this junk out. This thing is all kind of confusing. And I was like, I need to ask somebody. I'm gonna get lost. My plane leaves in an hour. And I asked this old Japanese lady. That lady couldn't speak. She didn't even know one word of English. Not no, not yes, not one. She didn't know anything. But that lady sat up there for 20 minutes and explained to me with using just her fingers and her hands.
That's awesome.
How to get to the airport. I'm like, this stop, and she put her hands up like, no, the next one. But we were talking and we didn't speak words to each other. Yeah. And I knew no Japanese, she knew no English, and I've experienced.
You don't know any Japanese yet?
I mean, I know some stuff, but at the time when I've only been here for 2 weeks, I was just going back to go visit my family, and so that was what was happening. I was just like, every time I ask a Japanese person, they always like, oh, I'll help you. And then if they know a little bit of English, they're like, oh, practice English with me. Like, they get all excited. They're super nice, super cool. They let you over in the road. Like, it's crazy. It's a different.
Japan is definitely one of the ones that I want to visit. A country that I definitely want to visit, and it's on my bucket list. But
one more thing to that, real quick. So a lot of black people come here from the United States because they're in the military, right? Do you know there's a lot of black people in Japan? You want to know why? Because they like Japan better than America. They're like, well, nobody racist towards me, and I can just do my thing and just live my life and not feel like there's racism all the time. They don't even go back to the state.
That's an interesting
right?
It's an interesting fact. So the reason I asked that question about the different countries, you have, I went to college in Texas, and one of the things I hated that people used to say, oh, Texas is the best state. And they would talk about how beautiful it is and it's better than every other state. And I said, oh, cool. Like, that's surprising because, Hawaii is pretty cool. And there's some pretty cool states out there. To say that Texas is the best is, you better have hopefully traveled. And where have you been? Like,
right.
Well, I haven't been outside of Texas. And you go, well, then you can't say that Texas is the best. And I kind of feel like we have that going on in our country right now, where you have, oh, this country does this and this country does that. And you go, yeah, but have you been to those countries where you don't have freedom of speech, where you don't have, like, did you know, if you go to, the Netherlands, I mean, they talk about, oh, we should be like Sweden. Do you know how hard it is to immigrate? Is that how you say that? Into Sweden? I mean, you have to like prove you're some sort of like purebred Swedish person to be able to get in there. And so they talk about all these different places and how great they are. And you're like, but you haven't been there. And until you go and experience, you're not going to know how great the U.S. is. And yes, I agree. We have some of our faults, but we are the land of opportunity. And probably the thing I love the most is we are the most diverse. When you look at our Olympic team, and when you look at the Japanese Olympic team, guess what race they are?
Japanese.
They're all Japanese. Chinese. We are black, white, Chinese, Mexican. We are every race.
It don't matter. Like, there's American. They just have a lot of
American.
Yeah, it's true. It's so true. I agree with you 100%. That's what I do like about the United States, despite all its faults. But I think that's how you are in a relationship with the with your spouse, right? Like you love them despite their faults, right? And
Is
they love you.
that going to be the new when you come into the United States, for better or worse, till death do us part?
That should be the slogan.
I like it.
Well,
That'd be
hey, I
perfect.
know we've taken a ton of your time, and
Yes.
it's a totally different time frame. It's like what, lunchtime for you over there?
Oh yes, it's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon right now, but it's all good.
Well, Javon,
Tuesday too. It's Tuesday.
it's Tuesday
Yeah.
and it's Monday for us. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know that's weird.
Yeah.
I super appreciate you coming and talking to us, and
Oh, sure.
I think something that I'm taking away right now is there are some things that are systematic. I would love to expand on that and
Yeah,
be able
sure.
to dissect that and then figure out a way to implement a change for that.
Yeah,
Because
I
I
agree
think
with
right now you hear it so much, it almost becomes a negative terminology for me where I go, stop it with that,
right.
because nobody can necessarily articulate it the way you just did,
Right.
and nobody's willing, maybe not that they can't articulate it, nobody's willing to sit down and talk about it in the
Right,
same
because
way.
well, if you don't recognize that, you just have white privilege. I'm like, okay, calm
There it
down,
is.
relax, like, chill out. Like they don't know. Like and some Black people don't know either. I mean, so it's not. It's just the idea that like we just need to educate ourselves a little bit more and be willing to be like, yo, wait, that really happens? Like, yeah, that really happens. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'm surprised, but we don't talk about it because we don't want to be like, oh, we're playing a race card or
Well, I
you're
think you
playing.
know better than anybody. If you've been a police officer and you're in the military, there are
Oh,
some
yeah.
things that happen that we don't
Yep.
know about, right? There
Oh.
are some things that that are probably would scare us and give us nightmares that
Yeah.
not only do we not know, we don't want to know, right?
Right. Because you'll freak out. You'll be like,
Mhm.
what? Yeah,
So there's a
yeah.
lot of dark things that happen. I get it, in the United States and across the world, that
Right.
our minds could be opened up to a little bit.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Well, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for having me again. And hopefully it gets saved.
We'll see. Double save this time.